Dear listener, I want you to take a deep breath and imagine a place many of us will never truly see. Picture the long, echoing corridors of a prison, the cold metal doors, the rows of cells where men live in a world cut off from freedom and familiar comforts. It is a place where every day is measured not by hours, but by walls and routines, and where hope often seems like a visitor who never stays. And yet, within those walls, humanity still breathes, sometimes faintly, sometimes fiercely. It is in this unlikely place that our story begins, a story of justice, compassion, and the quiet, unshakable power of human connection. In a courthouse just a few blocks from the city's bustling streets, sat Judge Rebecca Hartwell. She was a white woman in her early 50s, known for her intelligence, fairness, and for a rare empathy that softened the rigidity of her courtroom. For nearly 20 years, she had presided over cases that tested the extremes of human behavior: anger, sorrow, regret. But despite the weight of it all, she still believed that justice was more than punishment. It was also about understanding, about seeing the people behind the crimes. One humid morning, a case came to her desk that would challenge those beliefs more than any other. The man involved was Marcus Reed, a black inmate in his late 40s, serving a life sentence without parole. To the prison system, Marcus was just a number, another file in a stack of many. But to those who looked closer, he was a man of quiet dignity, someone who had spent years filling notebooks with poetry, letters, and reflections under the dim light of his cell. He had learned to carry himself with calm strength, even as the walls and routines of prison sought to break him. His eyes, dark and steady, hinted at both sorrow and resilience. Rebecca first met Marcus during a procedural hearing. Unlike many inmates, he did not enter the courtroom with fear, anger, or defiance. Instead, he walked with quiet confidence, his gaze meeting hers without hesitation. He spoke calmly, without pleading, without trying to manipulate. His words carried the weight of a man who had accepted the life he lived and the consequences of his past. And yet, behind that calm, there was something unspoken, a longing, a fragile ember of hope that refused to die despite decades of confinement. Weeks later, that longing revealed itself in a letter. It was addressed to Judge Hartwell's chambers, written with careful, deliberate handwriting. As she unfolded the paper, she expected another request for release or a routine petition. Instead, she found something profoundly human. It was Marcus Reed's last wish. He did not ask for freedom, nor for special treatment. He asked for a single, simple chance to see his estranged daughter one last time. Years of separation, hardened by prison walls and fractured trust, had turned them into strangers. Now, with failing health and limited time, Marcus longed only for a brief moment, to look into her eyes, to say he was sorry, to speak to her not as an inmate, but as a father. Rebecca read the letter slowly, the words lingering in her mind long after she set the paper down. Judges receive petitions every day, but this one was different. It carried more than legal significance. It carried a life, a father's hope, and the quiet dignity of a man too often overlooked. The system was not built for such requests. Bureaucracy, protocols, and precedent all suggested that Marcus's wish was nearly impossible. And yet, Rebecca could not shake the question that rose within her. Is justice only about punishment, or can it also be about healing and human dignity? The decision before her was complicated. To grant Marcus's request would mean navigating layers of bureaucracy, risking criticism from colleagues, and potentially facing controversy. She was a white woman in a position of authority, considering the plea of a black man whose voice had been largely ignored by society. The implications were immense, both professionally and personally, but something about Marcus's words refused to leave her. A father's hope, fragile yet persistent, called to her sense of humanity. For the first time in years, Rebecca realized that her role was not just to enforce rules, but to recognize the lives behind those rules. She understood that in that quiet courtroom and beyond the prison walls, she could make a choice that mattered, not just legally, but humanely. And so, dear listener, our story begins with a letter, a wish, and a decision that would challenge everything Judge Hartwell believed about justice, fairness, and the power of a single act of compassion. Between the black robe of the law and the beating heart of humanity, she would soon have to choose whether to follow the rules, or to listen to the quiet call of kindness. Marcus Reed had spent most of his life behind bars, but he had not allowed the walls to fully define him. Every morning, he rose with the ritual precision that prison demanded, making his bed, following the schedules, attending the limited programs available. But inside, he carried a world of thought, reflection, and memory that the guards and officials could not see. He remembered the days before his conviction with painful clarity, the warmth of his daughter Emily's small hands, the way her laughter would fill a room, the quiet pride he had felt watching her learn to ride a bicycle. Those memories were both a comfort and a torment, reminding him of what he had lost and what he longed to regain. Life inside prison had taught him many lessons. He learned to navigate the delicate hierarchies, to recognize which disputes were worth engaging and which were better avoided. He read constantly, devouring books of history, philosophy, and poetry, finding pieces of himself in words written by others who had wrestled with injustice, regret, or longing. He wrote daily as well, filling pages with reflections, letters, and stories, though most remained tucked away in his cell. Writing had become both a sanctuary and a bridge to the outside world he might never touch again. Yet even amidst these small routines, one thought remained dominant: Emily, the daughter he had loved with all his heart, yet from whom he had been estranged for decades. Their relationship had been severed not only by his imprisonment, but also by the pain and mistrust that had festered over the years. Letters he had sent often went unanswered, and phone calls were rare and awkward, leaving Marcus to wonder whether she even wanted to see him. Despite this, he refused to abandon hope. His illness was a constant reminder of his mortality. Each day brought aches and weaknesses that reminded him that time was not on his side. The prison infirmary could only do so much, and Marcus knew that he might not have many opportunities left. It was this knowledge that prompted him to write the letter to Judge Hartwell. In it, he expressed no complaints, no demands, only a sincere, heartfelt wish to see Emily one last time. It was a request made with humility, an acknowledgement of the wrongs he had committed, and a hope that some fragment of human connection could be restored before his life ended. Marcus imagined the moment with painstaking detail. He pictured Emily's initial hesitation, the uncertainty in her eyes, and then the recognition, the fleeting yet profound understanding that despite everything, he was still her father. He pictured the conversation, short yet meaningful, the chance to apologize, to explain, and perhaps to offer a sense of closure for both of them. Even if the meeting were brief, even if the words could not fully repair the past, Marcus believed that such a moment could matter. Inside, he wrestled with anxiety as well. He knew the obstacles were immense. Prison regulations, legal bureaucracy, and societal expectations all seemed designed to prevent such human acts. Many would see his request as impossible, unnecessary, or even undeserved. He had no guarantee that Judge Hartwell would approve it, yet he trusted, against all odds, that she might see the human side of the story, that she might understand that this was not about lawbreaking, but about a father's last attempt to make peace with the life he had lost. Marcus's cell became a place of quiet preparation. He organized letters, combed through memories, and rehearsed what he might say. Each evening, he lay on his cot, imagining Emily's voice, the slight tremor in her tone, and the tentative steps toward reconciliation. The thought both frightened and comforted him. If he were denied, he knew the disappointment would be crushing. But if he were granted even a fleeting chance, it could transform the remainder of his life, short as it might be, into something meaningful. In the weeks that followed, Marcus's hope became a quiet but persistent force. He observed routines with greater attentiveness, maintained his behavior meticulously, and spoke with a calmness that reflected both patience and anticipation. Prison staff noticed the change. He was more reflective, more deliberate, more focused. He did not ask for favors or special treatment. Instead, he carried the weight of his desire quietly, letting it guide his actions without drawing attention. Even as Marcus imagined Emily, he understood that the encounter would likely be brief. He knew that years of separation could not be undone in a single conversation. Yet he clung to the belief that acknowledgement, apology, and love, even imperfect and fleeting, could bridge what time and mistakes had fractured. In his mind, it was a simple wish, a human one, yet its fulfillment would require courage and compassion far beyond the ordinary. And so, Marcus waited. He waited not only for a decision from Judge Hartwell, but for the possibility that one person in a rigid system could recognize the value of a human heart over rules, that one act of understanding could make a difference in the life of a man who had long been defined by his worst moment. Judge Rebecca Hartwell read Marcus Reed's letter again, sitting at her polished oak desk, the quiet hum of the courthouse around her. She had spent hours pondering it, weighing the legal constraints against the human plea before her. The black robe she wore every day represented authority, rules, and the unyielding structure of law. But now, it felt heavy in a different way. It carried not just responsibility, but moral choice, an opportunity to act on compassion in a system that often had little room for it. Rebecca's mind replayed Marcus's words, the sincerity, the humility, the quiet yearning of a father who had spent decades in confinement. She knew the risks. Granting a request like this could invite criticism from colleagues, superiors, and the public. They might argue that personal connections had no place in judicial decisions, that allowing a prison visit for an inmate with a life sentence undermined the system. Yet, as she looked at the neat handwriting on the page, she could not ignore the humanity in front of her, even if it was represented only through words. For days, she consulted legal manuals, reviewed prison policies, and spoke quietly with advisors. Every path seemed complicated, every approval tentative. Bureaucracy, protocol, precedent, they all seemed designed to discourage the very act she was contemplating. And yet, despite the obstacles, Rebecca found herself returning to the simple truth she had always held. Justice without empathy was hollow. Punishment could correct behavior, but only understanding and kindness could heal hearts. Rebecca thought about her own life, about the people she had judged and the choices she had made. She recalled moments when a kind word, a patient hearing, or a small allowance of mercy had changed the trajectory of someone's life. Could she offer the same to Marcus? She wondered if, in doing so, she might be challenged by colleagues or misunderstood by the public. But she could not let fear prevent her from doing what felt right. The legal team cautioned her. "It's unprecedented," they said. "You could be setting a standard no one expects." The warden, too, expressed concern, noting the complexities of arranging such a visit. But Rebecca listened without judgment. She weighed their concerns, but her decision would not be guided by caution alone. It would be guided by principle, by the belief that even within the rigid confines of the system, humanity must be recognized. Late one evening, alone in her chambers, Rebecca finally made her choice. She would grant Marcus Reed the opportunity to see his daughter, not as a reward, not as a favor, but as an acknowledgement of his humanity and the dignity of a father's final wish. She began to coordinate with the prison staff, drafting the necessary approvals and arranging a controlled environment where Marcus and Emily could meet safely. Every step required patience, negotiation, and meticulous planning. Yet Rebecca felt a quiet certainty that this was the right path. She also considered Emily. How would she respond? The estrangement had been long and painful. She might be angry, hurt, or indifferent, but she also might recognize the courage it took for her father to make this request and the sincerity behind it. Rebecca hoped that the meeting could offer at least a fragment of reconciliation, a moment of connection that could never be replicated. As preparations continued, Rebecca found herself reflecting deeply on race, power, and privilege. She was a white woman in a position of authority, navigating a system that had historically marginalized people like Marcus. She understood that her decision carried more than the weight of one father's wish. It was a rare instance in which compassion could transcend systemic barriers. In those quiet moments, she realized that sometimes justice required courage as much as adherence to the law. Meanwhile, Marcus's anticipation grew. Though he could not know the details, he felt the stirring of hope. Every day, he followed the routines, maintained his composure, and imagined the moment he would finally see Emily. For Rebecca, making the decision had been a test of empathy. For Marcus, it was a test of faith. Both were navigating a system that rarely allowed for emotional nuance, yet both were driven by the possibility of human connection. Rebecca's final approval involved hours of coordination, security, timing, and sensitive communication with Emily, who had been contacted discreetly. But when all was arranged, she felt a profound sense of purpose. Her role as a judge was not merely to enforce law, but to recognize the moments where justice and compassion intersected. And in granting Marcus this opportunity, she affirmed that even in a world often defined by rules, humanity could prevail. As she signed the final documents, Rebecca thought of Marcus in his cell, a man whose life had been defined by consequences he could not escape. She thought of Emily and of the fragile chance for reconciliation. And she understood that in that moment, her decision was more than legal. It was a testament to the enduring power of empathy, courage, and human kindness. The day finally arrived. Marcus Reed, dressed in the simple but neat prison uniform, was escorted from his cell to a small, secure visitation room. His heart raced, though he tried to maintain the calm demeanor he had cultivated over decades. The metal doors clanged behind him, the echo bouncing off walls that had held him captive for most of his adult life. Every step he took was measured, yet inside, a storm of emotion brewed. He had imagined this moment countless times, yet the reality now was sharper, heavier, and infinitely more profound than any rehearsal in his mind. Emily arrived shortly after, accompanied by a prison liaison. Her eyes widened the moment she saw her father. For a heartbeat, she froze, unsure what to make of the man before her. The same man from childhood memories, yet changed by time and circumstance. Marcus saw her hesitation, and his chest tightened. He wanted to speak, to explain, to apologize, but words seemed insufficient for decades of separation and pain. "Emily," he began, his voice low but steady. "I know I don't deserve this, and I know I've lost so much time with you. I wanted to see you one last time, to tell you I'm sorry, that I love you." Tears welled in her eyes. She took a tentative step forward, then another, until she was close enough to reach for his hand. It was a small gesture, yet it carried immense significance. A fragile bridge over years of absence, a connection that neither law nor circumstance could erase. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Words were unnecessary. In that gaze, a lifetime of longing, regret, and love intertwined. Marcus's heart swelled and ached simultaneously, but he felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. Emily, too, felt the complex swirl of anger, sorrow, and tentative forgiveness, tempered by the realization that despite everything, the man before her was still her father. Rebecca Hartwell, monitoring the visit from her office with discreet oversight from the prison staff, felt a quiet satisfaction. She had anticipated the legal challenges, the criticisms, the potential backlash. But witnessing the human impact of her decision, she understood something deeper. Her role as a judge was not only to enforce law, but to recognize humanity when it demanded acknowledgement. In granting Marcus this final wish, she had affirmed that compassion could coexist with justice, that small acts of understanding could resonate far beyond the confines of a courtroom. The visit lasted only a short while, but its significance was immeasurable. Marcus and Emily spoke softly, sharing memories, apologies, and hopes for what little time remained. They laughed briefly at a shared memory, cried quietly together, and for a fleeting moment, the past's harsh shadows lifted. Marcus knew he might not have another opportunity to see her, but in this room, the years of separation, the walls of prison, and the weight of mistakes felt lighter. When the visit ended, Emily embraced him fully, pressing her face against his shoulder. Marcus, trembling, held her as tightly as the prison protocol allowed. He whispered, "Thank you," a word that encompassed decades of longing, remorse, and love. For her part, Emily nodded, the faintest smile breaking through her tears, a silent acknowledgement that even fractured bonds could be honored, if only briefly. As Marcus was escorted back to his cell, he felt an unexpected calm. The walls that had confined him for so long now felt less oppressive. He carried with him a piece of freedom, not in the physical sense, but in the emotional liberation of having fulfilled a father's most profound desire. It was a gift not just from the system, but from a judge who had chosen empathy over procedure, humanity over mere legality. Rebecca returned to her chambers afterward, reflecting on the day's events. She knew her decision had been unusual, perhaps even controversial, but witnessing the reconciliation had reaffirmed her belief in the power of kindness. In a world often dominated by rules, deadlines, and protocol. Moments like this reminded her that the law could serve more than punishment. It could serve redemption, understanding, and hope. Marcus never forgot that day. It became the most significant moment of his life behind bars, a reminder that even in circumstances defined by limitation, humanity could shine through. Emily carried it with her as well, a memory of courage, forgiveness, and the fragile yet resilient bond between parent and child. And for Judge Hartwell, it became a defining moment of her career, a testament to the idea that integrity, compassion, and courage could coexist in the pursuit of justice. In the end, the story of Marcus Reed and Judge Rebecca Hartwell was not just about a prison, a courtroom, or a letter. It was about the timeless truth that while the world often imposes boundaries and limitations, acts of understanding and compassion have the power to transcend them. And sometimes a single decision, to listen, to grant a wish, to honor humanity, can change the lives of everyone it touches.